the one, the only, the best, Brent Musburger. How are you, sir?
I am fine. I am fine. Can't wait. Can't wait for the Super Bowl. I hate this week off, Rich. You know that.
Mm-hmm.
But the money just keeps on flowing, lad.
So where do you? All right, let's start before we get to the Super Bowl. What is your take on what the NBA seemingly proffered to the state legislature in New York State, saying that if gambling is legalized state by state, if the Supreme Court makes a ruling and state legislators can now legalize gambling in their state, that the NBA wants 1% of a cut? What do you think of that, Brent?
Well, like every operator, I laughed when I saw it. Not going to happen. Wait a minute. You've argued for decades that gambling in Nevada threatens the integrity of your game, and now you want a 1% integrity fee? Not going to happen. Rather interesting, though, Rich, from the standpoint that the NBA has been ahead of every other professional league in accepting the reality that gambling on sports is here to stay. Whether the Supreme Court allows New Jersey to accept those bets or not, you can gamble globally, offshore. You could go to a book in Costa Rica, Panama. If you're in London, if you're down in Australia, if you're in Hong Kong, you can bet. But the books are not about to start handing over 1% of the take. First of all, there's this misunderstanding of how much money is made by gambling on sports. The sports book here in Las Vegas, 4% is a pretty good hold. When you take a look at what happened, it was $4.5 billion bet last year. I mean, all these records they're public records. They have to file their income tax reports and everything. Far more money, ladies and gentlemen, is made on slot machines than betting on sporting events. So, but it was a foray that fascinated me, and all the operators will take dead aim against it, and not going to happen. Now, the thing is, the NBA can threaten a state like New York simply because they've got teams in the NBA. Good luck going to New Jersey where you've yanked the team out and put it in Brooklyn and say you're going to give us 1%, assuming that it's going to be legalized by the Supreme Court. And speaking of the Supreme Court, Rich,
yes,
the other thing is I'm going to assume that more than one of the justices saw the report. And they said, wait a minute, you're asking for, you want to become part of the bookmaking operations? Of course we should legalize it. So I think that probably is going to help the legalization in New Jersey if I have to read the tea leaves. But I don't think, in the end, what the NBA has to do is just what they've done over in Europe and down in Australia, is what you do is you sell the rights within your building and the advertising rights to the different casino operators who book sports.
So but you know the NFL better than most, Brent Musburger. Do you think the NFL will ever, even if the Supreme Court makes its decision, open arm embrace what you have open arm embraced in this part of your career, Brent?
Well, because they've approved the Raiders' move to Las Vegas, and I drive past the construction site, not every day, but every third day, I'm by their construction site. And there's a bridge there over Interstate 15, Rich. I can walk from the Raiders Stadium to a half dozen sports books on the Strip and make a bet on the NFL. So if they're not embracing it, they better give me a good reason why, because you're putting up a stadium within walking distance of betting on your games. And unless they have got technology that I'm unaware of, you'll be able to sit in the stands and make a bet during the game.
Brent Musburger joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. What do you think of the XFL gambit that got announced yesterday by Vince McMahon, Brent?
Oh, a publicity stunt. I don't pay a whole lot of attention to that. But if he goes through with it and we got teams, we'll put a spread up here in Nevada. We'll talk about it.
I'm sure you will. All right, then let's get to the big one, Super Bowl 52. How are you reading this one, Brent?
Well, I've been following the money here, Rich, and the big money, and some big money has fallen, and it's fallen on the Eagles. MGM, which operates 10 different sports books here in the Las Vegas area, had Philadelphia at plus 5.5, and they took a multi-million-dollar bet. A couple of $1 million and maybe even more after the juice was paid. They took the Eagles in the 5.5, and MGM quickly dropped it to 4.5 even if you want the Patriots money on that. So they're begging for Patriots money. And then a little bit later in the afternoon yesterday, a bettor came into the South Point and bet $500,000 on the money line, taking the Eagles. A couple of the big offshore shops had already dropped it to 4.5, although I did see this morning that 5 dimes and went back to 5. So some Patriots money showed there, and that's a Costa Rican book. And so most of the big bets have been on the Eagles, and that doesn't surprise me from the standpoint that last week the Patriots had to come from behind, down I think it was 14-3, then 14-10, rallied against a good but not an outstanding Jacksonville team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. There's been a lot of criticism by gamblers in Nevada over the conservative play calling by the Jaguars in the second half, and the Eagles were lights out. Lights out. There was a lot of money bet on Minnesota, and the Eagles just tore them apart. And Nick Foles looked like the second coming of John Elway or Peyton Manning. And so the bettors are always influenced by what they see last. I really haven't decided myself, Rich. I'm waiting to see that Gronk is cleared from concussion protocol. I assume that he will be, although he didn't play last year. And
that's right.
Let's see, James White, Edelman, Amendola, they all had great games for Tom Brady. And it's hard for me to go against. I had Atlanta, full disclosure. I had Atlanta last year and watched it wilt away. They had some questionable play calling down in the fourth quarter. Belichick and Brady have this wonderful ability to be calm when all hell is breaking around them, and they wait for the other side to make a mistake. Now let's go to Seattle at the 1-yard line, bypassing LeGarrette Blount, throwing a pass, intercepted, Super Bowl victory for the Patriots. They seize the moment better than any team that I've ever watched in the National Football League. And when you make a mistake, especially in the second half, it's going to be lights out. They're very calm under pressure, and I think that gives them an advantage. Although Long and Blunt are now over on the other side, and they can certainly help the youngsters on the Eagles in preparation of what goes on. I noted yesterday that the Eagles worked in pads. That means they're putting their heavy work in, as John Madden was the first coach to discover. Put your work in that week before you go to the site of the game. Then you've got to go to all the news conferences, you got to go to the parties, and you do just some light work once you get to the site, which is Minneapolis in this particular case. So, listen, I've got such great respect for what the Patriots have accomplished over the years, but this is a very good Philadelphia Eagle team, and the NFC, in my opinion, was a little bit stronger than the AFC this year.
So, again, Brent, there's a couple more questions I want to ask you here before my bosses at the NFL have a complete coronary over all the amount of money that you just mentioned. Why shouldn't they have a coronary over something like that, Brent? I mean, when they hear that sort of money being laid down, is there no concern at all that some nefarious forces can somehow infiltrate Super Bowl 52? I know you're laughing, but seriously, I mean, give me that response here.
Well, what's Tom Brady's salary? Do you know?
It's through the roof.
How many?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So if you're gonna fix an NFL game, which position? Forget a name. Which position are you going to start with? Now I'm going to give you an asterisk on this because we all know we would choose the quarterback, okay?
Sure.
And way back in the days in the 30s of the professional football games, there was a lot of rumor and gossip about certain quarterbacks gambling on games. If you went to Mr. Brady and said, listen, I'd like you to kind of keep this close, just win this by a field goal or so, it would cost billions and billions of dollars for you to hammer into one of these professional athletes, whether it's professional basketball, Major League Baseball. I'm not concerned about that. I do think that you have to watch your officials. I think you have to watch them very closely. I think they have to undergo checks because I think there, as we have seen with the NBA over the recent decade, you have to beware. I'm not concerned about any professional athlete today in one of our major leagues simply because of the amount of money that they make and how much it would take to convince him to shave points or try to do something. I'm not concerned about that. You do have to beware of your NCAA athletes. I've said it time after time. However, it will not do to legalize gambling on professional sport in this country and not the NCAA because it's going to go on anyway. We know what's going on. Billions and billions of dollars are going to be bet in the global books around the world. And, of course, New Jersey, leading the way, wants to get its hands on some tax dollars, understandably so. Listen, certainly the NFL should be careful and beware, but the bookies are their best friend. The bookies are their absolute best friend, and they have been for decades. What they don't understand, they're the ones that want the honest game because all things considered equal, they just want to get a middle. They got the pig. They're going to win no matter. Now, most of the time it's not because you do not have equal money on the two sides. So the bookmakers have a position, usually with the underdogs that they're pulling for, to win outright to help them on the house. The leagues don't have to be concerned. And in the case of the National Football League, especially the National Football League, it would not under any circumstance be as big as it is today without people taking a position on the game. Now, I'm not talking just about the guys I spoke about, the $2 million bet or the $500,000 bet. I'm talking about the man-to-man for dinner, the $5, the $20, the $100 bets, or the leagues that you play in without even point spreads, picking the winners, or you play in other leagues where you pick maybe 5 and you got a confidence and you vote them down 5-1. This helps fuel the interest in the National Football League. And how about fantasy? They signed in with fantasy. The biggest fantasy in the world are the operators of the NFL franchises trying to convince me that that's not gambling. I mean, come on. Get out of Dodge, baby.
Last one for you, Brent. I got about a minute here. What is Super Bowl 52 for Brent Musburger? Where are you going to watch it? Paint the picture for me.
I am going to watch it in the studio at Eisen because we have been experimenting, Rich, during the NCAA final game, the Alabama-Georgia game, and last week during the conference championships with in-game wagering, which is the fastest-growing type of betting. And they change the odds based on first downs, certainly scores, field goals, touchdowns. They freeze it. The three primary bets during the game will be point spread, money line, over-under. And there are people around this globe, that's the only bets they make. They will not make one before the game, but they will go in, they will sign into their gambling account, and they will fire away as the game unfolds, and it is very, very fascinating. Let me give everybody an example. Last week when Minnesota went up 7-0 quickly on that opening drive, you could get the Eagles for 7.5 points. You could have the Eagles with 7.5. And Gil Alexander, one of our hosts at BSN, he was right with me on the air live. He fired. He took it, and the rest is history. He was a winner. On the other side of it, we had somebody fire on an over/under. He lost his bet. So it's a form of wagering as the game unfolds.
Brent, you're the best. Thanks for the call. We'll chat soon, okay?
You got it. Thanks, bye.
Always. That's Brent Musburger.
For more Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Rich Eisen Show app.